Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. So, let's see, am I sharing my presentation? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu wa ba'd. Right, so we'll hopefully we'll try to finish for next week, and then we'll move to food and drink, inshallah ta'ala. All right. So did we talk about the not running, where the imam is and all that?
Yeah.
About that. If you catch the imam in the ruku', in the bowing, you heard that, okay? And then we talked about when it's done, you make up the number of units, rak'ahs that you missed, right? We covered that down. Correctable, the next section. This is where we stopped, right?
Wait, didn't you mention this also? Like, was it about like, the imam makes a recitation mistake or like
that was before. Yeah, that was different. So that was did we do this?
It depends like what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, maybe we did some of this. Yeah. So if you miss multiple positions, what's called the arkan or the rukn, like you have to repeat your prayer. So if you don't have the right intention, you have to repeat your prayer. If you skip ruku' or if you skip sujood or something like that, bowing, you have to repeat your prayer. In the first assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and you don't say any salam, you have to repeat your prayer. So these are like fun. Then you have other mistakes which are a little bit lower than that, where you can actually fix them at the end. So if the most common mistakes that people make that you can fix, number one, sitting. So if you're praying or Isha or Maghrib after 2 rakahs and you do tahiyyat, right? And you skip it and you just say Allahu Akbar and you go. If you skip that, what should you do?
You do your prayer again?
So no, it's not that you skip it and you redo your prayer again. So you could do that. If let's say this is the first, you could do that. But what else you can do is if you skip that second one, if you are if you're less than halfway up and you realize right in the middle, halfway, you should, and you do your tahiyyat. If you're more than halfway up, don't go back. Skip the extra sitting and continue your prayer. And at the end of the prayer, you add 2 sajdas, what's called, means the prostration for making a mistake, and this will correct it.
So you do salam and then you go to
Get to that about how to do it. The question is when do you need to do it, right? So there's 2 types of mistakes. Mistake where you've missed the fundamental part of the prayer, where you need to repeat the prayer. Mistake where you can make up the mistake. All right. So this mistake of skipping the first sitting is a penalty mistake. You can make it up by making 2. Mistake number 1, that's very common. Mistake number 2 is when you recite silently when you're supposed to recite out loud, vice versa. So if you're praying Zuhr, for some reason you're leading prayer or whatever, and you start going Alhamdulillah, doing it loud, and then all of a sudden you realize and you stop and you're like, oh no, I'm supposed to be quiet here. You make it up by doing 2 sajdas. You are praying Maghrib, and you're supposed to be saying it out loud, and sometimes and you just finish Surah Al-Fatiha by yourself, and then you're like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this out loud. Then you continue to go and fix this by doing 2 sajdas at the end. Okay, so this is condition number 2. Surah after Surah Al-Fatiha. So if you're in the second rakah, second unit of prayer, Fatiha and more Quran. You recite Fatiha and you say Allahu Akbar, because you just kind of, this is quite common. What do? Do you go back up? No, you don't go back up. Finish your sajdas to make up for it. Okay, so that's the 3rd common mistake. Mistake is you start 1 extra unit or extra rakah of prayer. You did your 4 and then you stand up and you get into 5th rakah. Right? for the third rak'ah. So you're not supposed to do that. So what do? As soon as you realize that you added extra rak'ah, immediately. So look at the difference. If you skip the intermediate sitting after 2 rak'ahs in a third or fourth rak'ah prayer, you don't sit back down. You skip it of your prayer. You got to sit back down because you're not supposed to be praying an extra prayer, extra. So you sit back down and you make up for your mistake by adding 2 sajdas at the end. Very common is if you forgot how many rak'ahs you're praying. If you don't remember where you're supposed to be 4, and you're like, I don't remember if I'm on number 3 or if I'm on number 4. I can't remember the situation.
You do the least.
You automatically assume the lower number, right? And the reason why is because the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said, whenever you have a doubt about something, you go with what you're sure with. So if you're deciding, did I pray 3 or did I pray 4? Well, you're doubtful about whether you're sure that you at least prayed 3. You remove your doubt and you go with the lower number, which is 3. Assume you had 3, but because you had a doubt, you have to make up for it. So how do you make up for it? At the end. Even though you might have added an extra one, or you may not have added an extra one, but because you have to make up for it by 2 extra sajdas. So these are the most common situations where you're 2 extra prostrations, sajdas, in order to fix the mistake that you made in prayer, right? So I'll just repeat it one more. Mistakes where you can fix them is if you skip the sitting. Prayer, you skip it. If you recite silently when you're supposed to recite out loud, or vice versa. If you skip or a surah after Surah Al-Fatiha, if you started an extra unit of prayer, and these 5 scenarios, what you do is you're going to fix it by adding 2 sajdas at the end of prayer. Now, there's 2 ways to make this up. Is the way that most people, basically the way that Imam Shafi'i taught. There's hadith valid, but one way is Imam Shafi'i taught a pretty easy way. He said, when you're just about to finish your prayer, you did your, Ashhadu la ilaha illallah, you did your Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, right? You say Allahu Akbar, you go into prostration, do normal 3 times, say Allahu Akbar, say Allahu Akbar again, do a second sajda, second prostration, say Allah, conclude with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum. You're done. So basically what you've done is, before saying salam, you add 2 sajdas, and then you say salam. This is one way to do it. Good. Second way to do it is in the other schools, like the Hanafi school and the Maliki school. To do is you're going to wait till the end of prayer, but you're going to say 1 salam. So you say Allah 1 time, and then you say Allahu Akbar, you do 2 sajdas, right? So very similar to Imam Shafi'i, he says right before the salam. Imam Abu Hanifa says right after you do 1 salam, do 2 sajdas. The difference is Imam Abu Hanifa says, and you repeat everything. You're going to do at-tahiyyat again. You're going to ashhadu an la ilaha illallah again. You're going to do Allahumma salli ala Muhammad again. Right? So one of them is longer, and one of them is shorter. Right? You don't just pick doing, but both of these are valid. Why it's important to know is that you may visit different masjids. You may make a mistake somewhere. You go to another country. In one country, you're going to see him does before saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. The Prophet did it that way. And another masjid you're going to see, he's going to say rahmatullah and then do the 2 sajdas. And then wait a little bit longer and then do 2 more. To know that both of these methods are fine. They're both based on the sunnah, but there's two different ways of doing it. Any questions on correctable mistakes? Yeah.
So you do down to sajda 2 times, and then you do the whole tashahhud thing, and then you do 2 salams, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So in both opinions, you're reading the entire Attahiyat, Durud Ibrahim, all that. And
Says you do 2 sajdas and then salams, nothing
right,
else.
but you're supposed to have read everything prior. In the Hanafi school, you're supposed to have read everything.
Yeah,
prior
yeah.
to that.
In the Hanafi school, you do it though one more time. You
Right.
say this. You should, of course, yeah. You're not going to skip this at all. Otherwise, you're not going to finish your prayer. So yes, in both of them, you're going to do it.
You do it the same way. There would be no difference.
Yeah, no difference between whether you're praying alone or you're leading.
In Jama'ah and then you're done, but someone tells you that you already actually missed this part, or you made that after you did salam to do the.
No,
You can't.
no. So yeah. So if and they tell you afterwards, such as right there. Yeah, you could do it after the prayer as well. Yeah. If you didn't know that you made a
Spoken, right?
But yeah, but the guy can't be speaking in the middle of prayer.
yeah.
Yeah. You mean after it's done? Yes.
Okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
So what do you do when you realize that you had made a mistake, the prayer, like by doing salam on both sides? So you just do another 2 sajdas, that's it?
Yeah. It's
Then
been
salam or
yeah.
no salam?
No, just two sajdas.
Just 2 sajdas.
2 sajdas. Now, if it's been a long time, it's been like 5 hours.
Finishing both salams and
Yeah.
somebody says, hey, you
Then
made a
do
mistake.
the
You
2
didn't do
sajdas.
2 sajdas.
Yeah, do the 2. All right. Any other questions on this? Okay. All right. Then so if you miss a prayer, you should make up the prayer as qada. So qada means you're making it up. Now, when you make it up, you should feel regret. On time is a big thing. It's not a small thing. So you should feel bad. And you'd be, you know what? Why did I do that? I didn't set my alarm. You're driving in traffic and you're like, I don't feel like pulling over. And then later on, you're making it, you know what? I shouldn't have done that. I should have pulled over. I should have done something. So you should regret. And if you miss more than one prayer, you should make them up in order, right? So and it's Asr time now, you should make up the Zuhr prayer, right? You miss Zuhr and Asr and it's Maghrib time now, and you're like, okay, let me make up the 2 prayers. You make it up in order, Zuhr and Maghrib. The only exception would be is if you walk into the masjid and they already started the prayer. You join the prayer and then you make up the other 2 afterwards. Question that people ask is, what if I've missed so many prayers? I've missed years of prayers, right? So there's 2 different opinions. So some scholars say you need to make up all the missed prayers no matter what. Or if you missed 500 prayers, you need to make them up, and you're going to make them up over 2 years or whatever it is. So you just keep on adding. Every time you pray Fajr, you pray 2 Fajrs. 1 Fajr to make up and 1 like that. There's another opinion, and that is that if you were raised in a you didn't understand the value of prayer. You didn't realize that you're going to have to make up these prayers or something like that. Make them up, but you make tawbah and you ask Allah for forgiveness for what you've missed. 500 missed prayers or making up 1,000 missed prayers or something like that. That was not the objective. Like when we talked about menstruation, or skipping their prayers due to menstruation every month. Right. So if it gets to that really high number, just make tawbah in general, and you try to do it for whatever you've done. Okay. Questions on missing or making up with the prayer?
So I had heard that when you're traveling, the only sunnah that you where does witr fall in that? And then I'll let you answer that first, and then
have witr is one of the most emphasized prayers out of all the prayers, right? The question of whether you make or whether you pray when you're traveling or you don't pray when you're traveling is a matter of difference of opinion amongst. Opinion is generally you need to make up the 5 fard mandatory prayers, and whatever else you do is not a requirement. Yes, good question.
So what if? Okay, so what if you miss Asha and then possible to wake up both, or yeah, before Fajr, the next day, clear up. If they make it up, or
Hold on once. Am I live streaming? Let me see. Sister Karima, did I forget to? I might have actually. Hold on. Live. I could live on YouTube, right? That's this. Let me put this up here. Oh. I forgot to do that. Should have
It's
done.
okay.
All right.
Reported the I will upload it.
It's. Let me just go live anyways right now. Okay, so sorry, your question again?
okay. If you were to miss Aisha prayer, okay, and then you wake up above Fajr, is it possible to make a Aisha or
If you missed Isha prayer and you wait
yeah?
before the time for Fajr has come in, so technically the time for Isha all the way until the beginning time for Fajr.
Oh,
So you would still be able to pray. Now you should never purposely dislike to delay it past midnight, but you're still within the Isha time. So if you woke up at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m., you can still pray the Isha prayer.
okay. But I have a second question.
Yeah.
What if you the Aisha after Fajr or no?
Make up Isha after Fajr. Okay. Technically, after, yes, you can still make up Isha prayer. You just don't do it during sunrise. Any prayer during sunrise in particular, but making up a missed prayer, normally you don't do any sunnah after Fajr. Making a qada prayer is okay after Fajr. Okay.
How do you make up missing prayers? Can you give us like for Fajr, how do you make it up? Like just
Exact-
two fard?
Two fard, exactly the same way you would normally make it up. Yeah.
Okay, so just
You
the
can-
fard.
For Fajr, you can add sunnah if you want to,
Okay.
because it's a very emphasized sunnah. But if you don't, just two is sufficient. Yes.
What if you don't remember how many minutes?
If you don't remember how many you missed, you go with your certainty. So you try to figure out, try to estimate and say, you know, it's probably 3 or 4. I know 3 for sure. Maybe I can add a 4th one as optional, but you know, try to estimate how many you missed.
But I heard there was a hadith that it's sunnah to do witr before Fajr. I don't know if that's sure if that's true. So that's what I've been doing, but I don't know if that's like true to do witr before Fajr.
So witr is recommended to do it before Fajr time if you can wake up.
Yeah.
And if you can't wake up, then you should do it before you sleep.
Right.
Okay.
If you're, I'm sorry, go ahead. If you're flying, overseas,
Mm.
I guess the clock and you keep getting into different time zones, like how do you deal with that?
So we're going to cover that in
Oh,
traveling
all right.
very short soon, inshallah.
Did
Yes.
you already cover the times when you're not supposed to do sajda?
No, we didn't.
Is that coming?
It's coming, inshallah. It might come, inshallah. If not, then ask me, inshallah. All right. Friday prayer. So Jummah prayer, there's a purpose to Jummah prayer. The purpose is for the community to gather together at least once a week. So, praying inside of a masjid is something that's recommended so that people get to see each other, the Muslim Ummah becomes stronger. But the Friday prayer is heavily emphasized more than the normal, everyday prayer, because at least once a week, Muslims should gather together, meet each other, and they also get the benefit of getting some reminder, because everybody needs a reminder once in a while. So who needs to attend the Friday prayer? It's mandatory. It's required for all adult males to attend the Friday prayer. And even for women, it's recommended for them to still come to the prayer because they need to get some knowledge and they need a reminder and all of that. But they don't fall in the same category because they may be tending to family needs and all that. So Allah made it a little bit easier for them. But for adult males, it's required for them that they need to go for the Friday prayer every single week. If you can't make it for the Friday prayer, or if you don't because you're a kid or because you're a woman or something like that, you need to pray Zuhr, because the Friday prayer was a substitute for the Zuhr prayer, right? Now, what are the excuses for not attending Friday prayer if you're an adult male? You have three conditions, three cases. Number one, if you're traveling, it's not a requirement. Now, if you're traveling, if you can find a masjid, it's still a good idea to go to the masjid and visit a new place and attend the Friday prayer, but it's not a technical requirement if you're traveling. Number two, if you're sick, and if you're genuinely sick and you're ill and it's difficult for you to come to the masjid, or you're contagious or something, you are excused. And number three is if there would be a severe difficulty, like if there's a snowstorm and it's really hard and kind of dangerous to make it out to the masjid or something like that, that would be in the category of difficulty. What happens though is sometimes people will either place themselves in the category of severe difficulty when it's really not that difficult, or they'll place themselves in the category of I can do this, but it's really difficult, and they're putting themselves at risk. It's very important to categorize yourself properly. So let's give an example for college students, right? College students has a class on campus and it happens to be at Jummah time. Do they need to go for Friday prayer or not?
They should, right? Yes,
Yes, they should. Why?
because there's not really a difficulty. But
Yeah.
and they are able to go there, like, technically.
Yeah, so they could record their class, have somebody else take notes. They're not going to fail. They're not going to drop out. They're not going to get kicked out of school. So the ramifications are really not that great. So they need to go for Jummah prayer. Now, let's say they're about to take an exam for their graduation, and it's only exactly on this Friday, and there's no makeups, there's no sick, there's nothing. They're going to have to wait an entire year to take this exam. Let's say it's the bar exam and someone has become a lawyer, and this is the only time frame that they have. And they have to wait another year before they can take this exam. Do they have a valid excuse or they don't? They have a valid excuse. So you can see an example of what's a valid excuse and what's not a valid excuse, right? So it's important that you categorize yourself properly. So the timing of Jummah prayer. The timing of Jummah prayer is the same as the timing of Zuhr prayer. So when Zuhr time comes in, which is right after the sun crosses the meridian, we talked about Zuhr prayer timing, and it ends at the end of Zuhr prayer, which was what? Who remembers?
Before Asr.
Which is what? Correct, before Asr, which is what?
Right, before the sun goes lower, or one shadow.
Ah, there we go. One shadow. What does one shadow mean?
Like one shadow, like the size of yourself on ground.
Yeah,
shadow.
so when yourself becomes one shadow length, that's when the time for Asr prayer starts and the time for Zuhr prayer is done. So that is the time for Jummah prayer. Now what happens is there's a few scholars who have a minority opinion that you can actually pray Jummah prayer a little bit earlier than Zuhr time. And some scholars who say you could pray a little bit later than Zuhr time. Now, these are not majority opinions that many people have accepted, but they're there. And what happens is Muslims who are living in a country where they say, look, our work is not allowing us to go out for lunchtime during this time. And there, we don't have care, or we don't have any organization that can fight for our rights and ensure that we're able to take time off of work or something like that. In those countries, like in France and places like that, where there's a lot of racism against Muslims, they have allowed that fatwa, and they say, we take this fatwa saying that since some of the scholars said it's allowed before, or some of the scholars said it's allowed after, if there's a need, we can take this other opinion that, genuine scholars have said it's okay, based on some hadiths. We don't think they're the strongest, but we're allowed to take them in that situation. So this should never be a default, but it's allowed when there's a need for that. In America, I don't think there's a need, especially not in California, because there's a legal right for you to take time off of work for religious reasons, and you can make up that work time. So you have a right to attend Jummah prayer. Okay, so that's the timing. The location of Jummah prayer doesn't have to be inside of a masjid. It can be anywhere. So if you have college students on campus, and they have a class at that time, what they can do is wait until the break time of the class. In the middle of the class, they can go right outside their class. Someone can go give a khutbah, 2-minute khutbah, 3-minute khutbah, pray the Jummah prayer, and it's going to be considered valid. So the location can be anywhere. It could be in a park. It could be, in a masjid. It could be outside, wherever it may be. In terms of the minimum number of people that you need to have a valid Jummah prayer, there need to be 3 adult men plus an imam. So there's an imam, and there's a minimum of 3 adult men who are required to attend the prayer. So this is the minimum is about 4. There's one scholar, he said the minimum was 3. Other scholars said like 40, 12, or much higher numbers. So this is a good number, 4 total, including the imam, of people who need to pray. So that's usually you can find that many people, in a work environment or in a college environment. And if you can't, then Jummah is not mandated for you, and you could pray Zohar prayer instead. So how do you perform the Jummah prayer? Well, there's 2 adhans for Jummah. Normally for every prayer, there's 1 adhan, but for Jummah, there's 2. So there's going to be 1 adhan for everyone to start getting ready. And then what happens is, right when people come to the masjid, before the khutbah, before the sermon is going to happen, there's a second adhan that's going to be called. And this is the adhan right before the imam starts giving the khutbah. Then what's going to happen is the imam will start by giving a sermon. He's going to give a reminder to people, say Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah, and then conclude it and sit down. He's going to sit down kind of like the time in between 2 sajdas or 2 prostrations. He's going to stand back up, give a second sermon, second khutbah, and then he's going to call the iqamah. So the iqamah will be called, and the prayer will start, and there's going to be 2 rakahs, 2 units of prayer, which is going to be out loud. Anyone who joins the prayer, the Jummah prayer, even if they join at the end, they just barely make it, they're still going to get up, they're going to make their 2 rakahs, but it's not going to turn into Zohar prayer. It still counts for Jummah prayer as long as you caught it by the end of the prayer. If you miss Jummah prayer, you cannot pray Jummah by yourself, so you're going to pray Zohar prayer instead. Right? Some of the etiquettes of Jummah. You should avoid bad smells. The Prophet ﷺ told us not to eat onions or garlic before coming to the masjid for Jummah, because so many people are going to be around you. And today that would include smoking or anything else that just smells really bad. You're supposed to brush your teeth before you go for Jummah. You're supposed to put on some perfume and smell nice. You're supposed to take a bath or a shower on Friday in the morning or right before you go for Jummah prayer. At minimum, the night before, which is starting from Maghrib time, because the day technically starts after sunset, this in the Islamic calendar. You're not supposed to be talking during Jummah at all. You're not supposed to say 1 word. So if your friend next to you is talking, you cannot tell him, hey, be quiet. You're not allowed to talk in Jummah. That counts as talking. So you can gesture and you can say like, you can tap him or something like that, but you cannot talk at all. And you cannot conduct any business during Jummah. Not in the masjid, ever. There's no business allowed inside the masjid, but during Jummah, you cannot be doing business outside. So if you're buying and selling something and the Jummah prayer is going on, and that's the Jummah prayer you're supposed to be attending, you're not allowed to do any of that business. And that's pretty much it. Questions on Jummah? Yes.
Wait, so what if like it's better for some people to do it after like the hard time, like like the only thing that's stopping them from doing it during the hard time is like what if like not enough people come to pray Jummah, like not 4 people.
Okay. So if they can't get enough people to get the minimum requirement during the normal Zohar time, and they're like, the only way we can do it is if we go with this other opinion. And if everyone was going to miss Jummah because of that, then go ahead and do that. Yes. Any question?
Yeah, okay, so what if there's a non, like, what if, tell someone else that they're not like a non-Muslim to like stand outside and like sell goods. Like, is it simple?
Okay. If a Muslim orders a non-Muslim to sell outside the masjid during Jummah time on their behalf.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yes, the point is anything that's distracting people from going for Jummah is prohibited, right? So if it's distracting people away from Jummah and they're supposed to be inside, but they're buying stuff outside, then yes, they're responsible as well. So they should not do that.
So if we don't have minimum people to do Jummah prayer, let's say there are only 2 people, can they do like a Jummah for Zuhr prayer?
Yeah, they could do Jama'ah for Zuhr prayer if there's not meeting the minimum number. Yeah.
I've seen this on the surgery in Orange County, where you do the second adhan after the khutbah, it's pretty much done. So it's not like in the beginning. So there is the first one, then the imam will give the khutbah, you sit down, stand up, and then there's
Oh,
second adhan, and then
so what you're referring to is what happens is there are some people who believe that the khutbah needs to be in Arabic, 100%. So what they do is they'll give,
This one? Oh.
yes, this is why.
Oh, okay.
So what they'll do is they'll do the first azan, then they're going to give a lecture in English. And they don't call it a khutbah, they call it a lecture.
Huh.
And then they're going to give the second azan, and then they're going to give a khutbah only in Arabic. And then they're going to do the prayer because they believe the khutbah can only be in Arabic. You cannot have any words of English or any other language in there. So they give an additional random lecture before. That's what's happening.
wow.
Yeah.
Well, which must make
Oh, Tustin Masjid is one of those.
That's the
Tustin Masjid is
yeah,
one of those.
that's
They've
the,
known for 20 years. They always do.
Arabic?
No, so they believe that the khutbah has to be in Arabic 100%. So what they do, most of the people who give khutbah there, so what they do is they do a lecture before the khutbah, and then they do the khutbah only in Arabic.
Most of India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, they follow
The whole country, the whole India, Pakistan,
they follow
Bangladesh.
fiqh Hanafi. Is this the practice?
This is not the Hanafi school, but this is what they follow.
Wait, is there any madhab or something?
So there's some madhabs that say this, yes.
Like which one?
The other three, the Hanafi were actually the most lenient on this, which is surprising, yes.
So
Yeah.
about, heard that if you miss 3 Jummahs consecutively, you leave the whole of Islam. Is that accurate?
So the idea of missing 3 Jummahs in a row, so serious as if you've gone outside of Islam. It doesn't mean that you're actually kafir or disbeliever, but if you shouldn't be missing even 1 Jummah. But if you miss 3 in a row, that's a very, very serious thing. So yeah, I mean, unless you have a legitimate excuse like travel or something like that. So it means people should go out of their way to make sure they get time off of work and they make it to a masjid.
Well, like you said, when you're traveling, you can try to find a masjid and not just use the caveat that I'm traveling.
As long as you're in a place that has Muslims, yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, we'll leave it at that. And next week, then we'll cover prayer when you're injured and prayer when you're traveling, inshallah. Okay. See you next week. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum.